welcome to Hopeful Conversations, brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Jordan Lally, lead singer and songwriter for the band The Big Infinite, and he is here representing the band as a whole. Jordan is a meditation teacher who focuses on mental health, mindfulness, and self-expression. Jordan, thank you for joining me today on Hopeful Conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Kari. I'm excited to be here with you.
I understand that you and the band members changed the band's name from Fiction 20 Down to The Big Infinite. Why did you want to change the name in the first place, and what inspired the new name?
That question is loaded with a lot of information. I'll do my best to be succinct, but so Fiction 20 Down was the band name for about 6-7 years, touring around the U.S. doing typical band stuff, playing, venues and bars and festivals, living out of a tour van.
Did the top 10 on iTunes?
Yeah, we did some cool. We put a lot of work in. We got some cool stuff going. We got some good momentum going, and then I lost my dad to a battle with clinical depression, and that really changed things for me personally. And so I took a step back from music altogether to regroup. My bandmates did the same. And when we kind of reconvened, when we got back together, we were just different. We were different people. That carried itself over to the music. And so it kind of felt there was a disconnect between what the band was and clearly the direction we were headed. And so a new name felt fitting. And so The Big Infinite was born.
Okay. Yeah. I watched your videos on your website. Why do you write music?
Oh man, I don't know that I have a choice. Honestly, it feels like, something it's certainly cathartic, but it's something that I feel kind of like I was born to do, particularly just to write lyrics and songs and express myself in that way. It's also something that I wanted to do for so long, and I was just too afraid, too anxious to get into it. And so when I finally started at 27, there was no looking back. So I write because I have to, because it's a part of me, and as I now know, also because it's just cathartic. It makes me feel better. Yeah.
You started at age 27. How long because you said you had the desire since in high school, right?
Yeah, since high school, I wanted to write songs, but never. I literally did not sing out loud for anyone else, not my wife now, my parents back in the day, for anybody at all to hear me until I was 27 years old. And I meekly started at 27. What's that?
Did you sing privately?
In my car, in the shower, I would. Yeah. And I thought that I had a decent voice. I was confident in that, but I wasn't confident in my ability to let that voice carry through my anxiety in front of people.
Your anxiety is what you would name it as?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Tremendous anxiety.
Okay. Can you describe what your music was like before and after the name change of the band?
Well, I would say the musicianship, particularly of my bandmates, DJ and Dre, has remained and certainly gotten better over the years as they become more accomplished musicians. I think the biggest change is in the honesty of the lyrics, and maybe the honesty or the vulnerability in my vocal delivery. And then the lyrics and my vocal naturally extended itself to how Dre and DJ would then fill out that song. So I would say from very self-conscious and sort of outward focused writing songs for other people, that was kind of Fiction 20 Down. And now it's very just vulnerable and cathartic, and what you see is what you get, and you're not trying to put on airs for anybody. It's more like the heart of it changed. I mean, all throughout the line, we've written songs that were kind of some reggae or acoustic or rock or a little bit of hip hop. So that's always kind of been there. We've always kind of dabbled in different genres, but I think it's really like the heart of the matter has changed.
Raw emotion and vulnerability being more authentic. What does more authentic mean to you?
Ooh, more authentic. It means truth is the first word that comes up, but true to the emotional core of whatever it is I'm letting go of or trying to convey. Authenticity was something that my anxiety kept me from for a long, long time, because I was always everything was running through this filter of what other people might think. And so authenticity has allowed that filter just to vanish. And so I just, I trust in my truth.
At what age do you feel like you started to feel anxiety?
In middle school, definitely. When we visit schools and my bandmates and I share our presentation, storytelling and concert, the power of expression, I start early on that presentation sharing a story of my first memory of anxiety, which was at McDonald's, wanting a packet of ketchup, but being too afraid to go up to the counter and ask for it because I was just anxious about talking to this cashier who I didn't know. So that's my earliest memory. But
That's your earliest memory?
Mm-hmm, of anxiety, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your dad suffered from depression?
Yeah, my dad struggled with, so he was by and large this joyful, happy guy, but he would have these bouts of depression once a decade. And he's usually triggered by money or something with his small business that he ran. And the bouts of depression would just be all encompassing. And so I know he went through one in my teenage years, but my mom and my dad mostly shielded me from it. And then on my 25th birthday, actually, was when I became aware he attempted suicide on my 25th birthday. And that's when I became aware that he struggled mightily with depression. And then about 9 years later is when he passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's like because Robbie completed suicide on his first attempt. I know that there's people that live with suicidal ideation for decades. Being a family member, a child of that, do you want to talk about what that was like? Or?
Oh, yes, certainly.
An adult child.
Yeah, I mean, adult in age, I guess, in number. But I don't know. There's still a lot of growing up to do. It was, man. This, I could talk on and on about it. It was so many things, but I think the one thing that my dad always was for me was, he's the patriarch. He was the rock solid, steady guy in our family. He didn't have a lot of ups and downs, just save for a few downs, and they were unfortunately really down. It sort of brought to light a tremendous amount of insecurity. My dad, my male role model, to see him struggling and to see him in a weakened state.
For you.
What's insecurity for me? Yeah. Cause you want to look to your parents to be, your foundations, your cornerstones. And by and large, my parents were that. But when my dad was struggling with depression, obviously that wasn't the case. And that was, the last year of his life in particular, he was just riddled with depression and lost 100 pounds, couldn't even eat, and he loved food. And so, yeah, I was insecure for sure upon reflection. I can see that now, but it really just brought it to a head and brought it to light that my dad, this dude, my buddy that I counted on, wasn't there in the same way that I was always accustomed to him being there. And so it was a really unsettling experience for sure.
I watched some of your videos on your foundation website, and you talk about your own experiences with depression. Is that like? What do you do to get through that?
Well, when I really would say struggled with depression, I wasn't doing anything to get through it. I wasn't coping. I was avoiding it. I was denying it. I was self-medicating or staring at my cell phone or doing whatever I could not to feel those feelings, which only empowered the depression just to stay there, kind of stuck in that state. And so when I was struggling, which was, off and on throughout my 20s, in particularly when I was in college, it was just dark. You can't look out. It doesn't matter what was happening externally, how many friends I had or how, what success I had in school. None of that mattered. It was, again, to come back to that filter that I was talking about earlier, like you're looking at life through this filter of worthlessness or hopelessness. And sometimes when I give talks, I equate it to wearing a pair of sunglasses. And, the sun can be shining, but if you're wearing a pair of sunglasses and you forget that they're on the bridge of your nose, you're going to look out at that world and things look dark and dim. You forget that the sun is shining. You forgot that the sunglasses are on your face. And depression is the same way. You forget that you're looking at life through this veil, through this depression. And so it doesn't matter how much sun is shining. You can't see it. You can't see the forest for the trees. And so that's what depression was like for me. It was just an inability. It didn't matter what was happening outside of myself. I had all this unexpressed and untapped emotion that I hadn't processed. And so I was looking at life through this just cloud of that emotion. But conversely, once I lost my dad and I started to just be open and honest and to meditate on a daily basis, and more than anything to process emotion, whether it was through my songs or through tears or whatever, that veil started to lift. And I realized that I think one of the great realizations is my emotions aren't conclusions. It's just passing weather. And as I allowed that to pass with a willingness to face it and to feel it, it passed with greater and greater ease. And, there are no absolutes, but depression is largely a thing of the past for me. And if I have an upsetting or unsettling emotion, it just moves through and I process it like a healthy human is intended to do, I think.
Wow. Did you have, so I don't want to jump ahead. Like, I feel there's so much to unpack. I talk about how you found meditation, or what point in your life was that?
It was, so there is one singular turning point, and it was my dad's passing. Two things changed for me immediately. One, my mom asked me to give the eulogy, and she said, what are we going to tell people? Because up until that time, we hadn't told anyone the truth. We had gone to great lengths to hide my dad's depression from everybody. My wife and I would cover a lot of his business meetings and meetings with associates. And we had, for that last year of his life, we had kind of isolated ourselves and come up with a bunch of excuses.
Okay.
And that was how I handled my anxiety and depression. Never talked about it. That's how he handled it. And that's how we handled it.
You hid it.
Yeah, we hid it. Didn't exist. Which made my struggles, and certainly my dad's, but speaking from my experience, that much more challenging, because you're just alone in it. You're not talking about it. I didn't talk to my parents.
It's very common. People who struggle with depression and anxiety, like you said, like looking through sunglasses. I often use the analogy of wearing a mask, like not being your true self. I don't know, when I have the opportunity to talk to kids and talk to parents, I say, like, really ask your child, is how you look on the outside, how you feel on the inside.
Yeah. Yeah. That was certainly the case for me, wearing a mask. We didn't use the terms anxiety and depression in our household.
No.
And only, it was really, even when my dad attempted on my 25th birthday, we talked about it when we connected in the hospital, for an hour. And then it was it. He said, can we please not talk about it? I'm fine. Everything's okay. It was medication and this and that. And honestly, at the time, I was happy to sweep it under the rug, because if I had to look at my dad as struggling, then I would have had to acknowledge my own struggles. And I want to just sweep it under the rug and keep pressing on and keep pressing on.
1 hour.
Yeah.
Your dad's the person that you looked up to, his request, and everybody was okay with that.
Yeah. And I can't speak for anybody else's reasoning, but for me, I was selfishly happy to sweep it under the rug, because if I didn't have to face his weakness, I didn't have to face my own, and we can all just soldier on. And, we were pretty good at soldiering on. We were a happy family, for the most part. And, but that stuff doesn't go anywhere. It just lays in wait, and you got to address it. You got to process it, whatever it is for the individual. I forget. We were somewhere before. I forget what you had asked me.
About 10 years later, your dad completed suicide.
Yes. Okay. So,
I asked you.
Yeah. She said, what are we going to tell people? And I truly don't know where this inclination came from, but just grace. I said the truth, and she asked me to write the eulogy. I sat down right then and there, and I wrote this 3-page eulogy in which I was honest about my dad and the beautiful life he lived, but also his struggles with depression and suicide. And this is where the thing started to shift, because I gave that eulogy, and then it opened the door. After the ceremony, people talked to me and they said, thank you. And they told me their stories. And then I, for the first time, told them my stories. And it was just this ripple effect of truth from there. And then the meditation piece came in just before the funeral, a couple of days before, at one of the services, the wakes, or the viewings, the viewing. One of my dad's old friends who I didn't really know. He showed up at the viewing and he handed my mom a book, and it was intended to console her. It was a book called Proof of Heaven by Dr. Eben Alexander. It was a brain surgeon who had had a near-death experience.
I've read it. Yeah.
Okay. So she was in no place to be consoled at the time. And so she just kind of handed the book off to me, not really thinking. And I took it home and I, for whatever reason, felt compelled to read it.
You started reading it at that point?
I read it, that's basically all I did between then and the funeral.
Okay.
And I will say that not at the time, not much of that book resonated or brought me much consolation, but he did say in there that when the doctor returned to his everyday life, there was one thing that approached the peace he had experienced during the near-death experience, and that was meditation. And he referenced a specific form of meditation called hemisync meditation, where you listen to headphones and you meditate through this really cool audio technology, which I'm not going to get into right now, but and so I downloaded a hemisync audio track, and the day after my dad's funeral, I just started doing it 15 minutes twice a day, each and every day. Processing everything I had to process, from the grief to the decades of repressed stuff I hadn't dealt with. And that, that was the turning point. And that was my introduction to meditation.
Huh. Okay. Back to unpacking. There's a lot there. Meditation and just that process of the truthfulness. That's, I think, what I want to kind of focus on a bit, because I guess losing my son, and Jordan, I was a funeral director prior to raising my children. I wanted to be a bereavement counselor. That's why I had a degree in psychology. And I think when Robbie died, I kind of had an idea of what we were entering into from just sitting on the other side of the table with families like you and I, and how they process that. And never did Jason and I have any doubt that we weren't going to be truthful. I don't even know that was a thought, that it was just our reaction. And I'm super, super grateful for that, because I feel like if I would have tried to lie about it, it maybe would have been, it's really hard to carry. It's still very hard to carry. It'll be hard for us to carry forever. Mm-hmm. But I think that would have been harder to carry if Jason and I would have responded with a lie and said something different about how Robbie died. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, well, from the lived experience of just having my dad attempted and not talking about it. Yeah, you're preoccupied with propping up a lie versus processing and connecting with people. And like just the opportunity to be here talking with you now, that doesn't happen if neither of us are just honest. And then this kind of connection, this is what I want to forge and foster in my life. This is what's uplifting, not the connections that I had before, which were with wonderful people, but they were superficial because that's all I would allow for in my life. So yeah, that totally resonates, 1,000%.
Last night when I was prepping to talk with you, on social media right now, like, if you know, is like the hashtag. And I'm like, Jordan and I know. And like, we know, and here we are, like your foundation that you have created is very much aligned with Robbie's hope. And yet I still feel like what we're trying to create for others is not what people want to know.
No, it's to come back to the truth. Yeah, not everybody's ready for that level of truth, and how, just talk about the suicide epidemic, how pervasive it is. People don't want to talk about it. In fact, most schools that we visit are we're brought there by an impassioned person in the community who has either struggled with their mental health or lost someone, or and schools that maybe for a time we were just trying to reach out to schools, when we first got going. And it was always like, just beating your head against the wall, because nobody wants to be the one responsible for having the conversation, even though the conversation is just powerful and connecting and inspiring and hopeful, just to be honest. But so I understand not everybody wants to go there.
Right. Just vulnerability and conversations.
Yeah.
Authentic.
Mm-hmm.
very similar to the type of music that you are now blessed to be able to be producing. Do you want to talk about power of expression? I found that on your Ed Lally Foundation, which I just think the work that you are doing for the almost 10 years is amazing. Do you want to talk about power of expression?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man. So the power of expression is this. I referred to it a little bit earlier. It's like storytelling and in a music in a concert setting. But basically, my bandmates join me, and I share. I touch on the impetus for my own personal kind of healing journey. One that DJ and Andre have also gone on themselves. The shift in focus from our band, and we share with students. Basically like a threefold message of mental wellness, which is creative expression, giving voice to what you're thinking and feeling through some creative outlet, conversational expression, talking about what you're going through, whether that's with friends and family or therapist, counselor, and mindful expression, allowing your thoughts and emotions to freely express themselves through a research-based practice of mindfulness. And so we share with that. It's all interwoven in stories and songs. And there's really two intentions behind the whole thing. Number one, to stand up there and through our vulnerability, share and show students that they're not alone in their ups and downs, in their struggles. And secondly, to empower students to put their mental health in their own hands, to let them know that you're not stuck thinking how you might be thinking right now or feeling how you might be feeling. And so yeah, that's the power of expression. It started out like, as this whole last decade of my life has been, just organically, like a group of students knew that we were in a band, and one of their moms had attended some of my meditation classes. And so they asked me to come, which in my meditation classes, I was always honest about my personal journey. So they asked me to talk and asked the band to play. And then a couple other schools reached out, and then we were like, I guess we should make a formal assembly. So we did that. And then, so we were reaching out, connecting with mostly schools here in Maryland, and then the pandemic happened. So we created a video version so we could continue our outreach. And then a director of a lot of mental health documentaries, he's done Greg Cherry's a great gentleman. He's done a film called Suicide, The Ripple Effect.
Oh, I've seen it. Okay.
Yeah. And a newer film that's really powerful called My Ascension. So he saw these videos and he's like, well, that should be a documentary. So he made it into a documentary. So that's enabled us to now extend our reach beyond, where we're traveling to currently, which is on the East Coast, so nationwide. So yeah, we're just, life is just kind of, sending us, we joke often because, a decade ago we were playing bar gigs till 2 a.m. and festivals. And now sometimes we're waking up at 6 a.m. just to make it to a public high school or we're playing a library or something like that. But life takes you where it wants to,
I bet it's very fulfilling.
Oh my gosh, it is leaps and bounds above anything I've ever done in the past. It's the most fulfilling thing in the world, particularly the conversations we get to have with students after the fact, whether it's through a formal Q&A or just kind of casual conversations. There's nothing professionally has ever approached the fulfillment that we experience. Yeah.
Are you finding, do you feel most embraced, maybe, I don't know if that's the right word, but by the students or by the adults in the room when you have the opportunity to be vulnerable?
It's always interesting because the adults have a lot of apprehension. The students are just, if they're not aware of us already, they're just like, well, what is this thing? I'm going to sit through another assembly. But then 10 minutes in, they're engaged, and then we start playing songs and they're clapping along if they're not familiar with them, and they're by the last song, most of them are holding up their cell phone lights, and it's just like, and then the adults who either have been moved by the students' demonstration of engagement or by some of the stories, are then they're kind of softened, and the whole thing is really it's a really moving experience. I think each time I'm surprised. And I'll be honest, like the first couple of times we did it, it wasn't something we set out to do. It was something that students invited us or asked us to do at their schools. And one of the schools that had asked us to come was my alma mater, called the John Carroll School here in Bel Air, Maryland. And I hadn't been there in 15 years. And I walked in and I was immediately reminded of my anxiety and all the great lengths I'd gone to hide my anxiety from everybody. but then I was filled with this sense of ease, and I went in and did the assembly. And, a lot of times, like I said, at the beginning of the assembly, there's kind of these blank teenage stares and like trying to, measure us up and what is this all about? And then so it was 700 students, and then we did a guided meditation. And I invite them, everybody, if you would like to, you can put your feet flat on the floor. And you heard 700 pairs of feet just boom on this gymnasium floor. And it was so loud and also so affirming to what we were doing and how engaged they were. That's where I really started to understand that, like, even that I wasn't alone. You know what I mean? Like, it's that we were all in this together, and kind of that, I think more than anything, that the message and the topic needs to be addressed and discussed. And that's what resonates. Thankfully, a lot of times they like the music and all that stuff, but really it's just like, let's be honest. Could we please be honest?
Right.
Let's just be honest. Like, what are we all doing here? It's ridiculous.
That's fascinating to go back to your alma mater, where obviously a triggering experience.
It was full circle in like the most beautiful way. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
What did you do for yourself in that moment to say, like, I can do this? Did you have to quickly meditate, or what tools did you have in your toolbox?
Just did a bit of breathing. Thankfully, when you practice enough, those tools are accessible to you, and they're powerful in those moments. So, spend some time doing some breathing, and I'm okay, and I'm present again, but that's certainly something that comes with practice and commitment to those things. That, there's like I think it's what's called a dose response relationship, but the more you do it, the more impactful it becomes.
It does take practice, right?
Absolutely.
Can you explain? Because I meditate a bit. I could put more effort into it. I do find it very grounding and very beneficial. I think my old mindset is just kind of gets in the way. To somebody that wants to learn more about meditating, what kind of suggestions do you have?
So those are the people that I'm most excited to talk to. So I'm very happy to answer this question. Because as I shared before we started this interview, I was one of those people who had no clue how to meditate, thought I couldn't meditate, thought the practice wasn't for me. It wouldn't work for me, something along those lines. So whenever I'm teaching new folks, the first thing I say, which kind of sometimes catches people off guard at first and then puts them at ease, is that you're not trying to stop your thoughts. You're not trying to silence your mind. You're not looking for this empty blue sky, that this meditation. I promise you, if you try to stop your thoughts, you're going to create tension, frustration, resistance. What we're doing in meditation is we're practicing and learning and training our minds, cultivating the ability to observe our thoughts. So it's not about observe our thoughts, become aware. What's that?
Beginners go into it with the conception that they're trying to stop their thoughts.
Yeah, they yes, most people by and large. And then if they're meditating for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and their mind is still racing, they think that somehow it's pass fail and they failed. And you can be tremendously at peace with your thoughts racing. What you do is, as you learn to observe your thoughts, you start to change your relationship you have to your thoughts, primarily your emotional reactivity to your own thoughts. A lot of people use the word triggering, and they are talking about the outside world. This triggers me, that triggers me, but there's nothing more triggering than our own thoughts. We react to our own thoughts. And so if we can learn to observe them, which is you just practice. People try to be present. That's BS. You don't try, you train to be present. You practice presence. And you're present when you're observing your mind, observing your thoughts, becoming aware of what's moving through your headspace and so often dragging you around like a dog on a leash. And so you just practice observing your thoughts. And to do this, you use a meditation anchor, just a focal point in the present moment. I think the most common one, the best one for new people, is to use a breathing technique. And the one that we teach to students, because it's pretty accessible, is called the easy breath. You inhale through the nose and you exhale slow and steady through pursed lips, like you're exhaling through a straw. Extend your exhale. When you slow down your breath, extend your exhale, you calm your nervous system. If your nervous system is calm, your mind and body start to calm down. So you anchor to it one breath at a time. Your mind wanders, you notice, come back to your breath. Your mind wanders again, you notice, and come back. It's not about stopping the mind from wandering. In fact, each time your mind wanders and you choose to come back to your breath, I look at that as a moment where you're incrementally carving out a new neural pathway. that is carrying you back into the present moment. So that's where the flip is, though. Like, I'm not trying to stop my mind from wandering. It's going to do that. I'm just noticing when it does, becoming aware and coming back to my breath. And so to get back to where we started, like, practicing in that way makes it instantly accessible for me to do that when I return to the John Carroll School. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I used to feel so anxious here. I'm like, deep breath in, slow, steady exhale. Oh, that's right. I'm not that guy anymore. I can be present. I'm good to go. So,
is there truth? I don't know if this relates to meditation, but this is something that I've learned in the past 4 years, is like, we think that we're really good at multitasking, but we really stink at it. And that's where breath work comes in, because like our breath as that anchor, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but like, we can't hold both that negative thought and that thought about the breath work that we're doing.
I think that there's a couple things there. I think that what happens when you meditate is you learn to soften your focus. So it's not that it's either or, breath or that negative thought. It's that my focus is now softened. It's yes and. I'm focused on my breath, and this thought is moving through my awareness. But because I'm not only focused on that, it starts to take its like proper place. It's not the whole story. It's just a part of the story. It's just one facet of the present moment. And so I'm more grounded and connected to my breath in the moment, not lost in my thoughts, traveling anxiously to the future or depressively to the past or whatever. So it's not that we're going to, it's not an either or. I think it's more of a yes and. And the example I use to folks when I'm teaching classes is to soften your focus in the same way that, like, on this conversation now, if you're looking at me, you could look right at my nose and focus on that. You could soften your focus and see my whole face, soften your focus further, see my nose, face, and everything behind me. We have that same ability mentally. We could soften our focus and allow those thoughts to move through our awareness and be part of the experience, but not the whole story. Does that make sense?
That does. Soften your focus.
Yeah. And also the multitasking thing. I had a student tell me this recently, that I don't know what book she referenced, but she said she read that I forget who the researcher was that wrote the book, but that is actually impossible for us to multitask. Like due to how our brains are wired. All I can say is that anytime I've tried to multitask, it makes me stressed. So if you just do one thing at a time, and you're more effective and efficient at those one things, and you can get a lot done, even if you're doing the same thing in a given half hour or 20 minutes, but you just knock them out one at a time and focus wholly, be present with each task one at a time.
Instead of being overwhelmed by it all.
Yeah.
I don't know if our multitasking, our desire, or we think our ability to multitask has increased because of our phones. Like,
yeah, I think you're right.
So present in like 99% of what we do on a daily basis.
Yeah. Man. Yeah. I get asked about cell phones a lot in class or at assemblies. And I think in and of themselves, cell phones are fine. Just like anything. Just like if you want to, I don't know, have a glass of wine if you're an adult or whatever. You can have a glass of wine. You can use your cell phone for 20 minutes. But if you're going to use your cell phone all day long and drink all day long, they're both not going to be good. Everything needs to be used in moderation. And so I think inherently cell phones are fine. And in fact, I think they're a wonderful tool to connect with people and to learn more about the world and not feel so isolated. But when we use them exclusively as another filter through which to view the world, it just becomes challenging, let's say. I mean, I don't know anybody, and we see it in our daughters, if we give them, my 10-year-old, if we let her use her iPad for, a half hour or something. Like most people, when you hop on into a device and you get off, you're like you don't feel the best. It doesn't matter what was going through that device. It's just something about like narrowing your focus to this computer staring at a screen. I don't know what it is, but most people aren't the most pleasant. It's just a distraction, like so many others that are available to us.
Yeah. And it's a distraction for feeling anxious, a distraction for in so many ways. I think part of like the problem, I don't know, for our youth, particularly for teenagers a little bit older than your daughter, our cell phones, like they are just used as like an escape for adults, to like somebody who is struggling with depression or anxiety, a young person. Like the first thing an adult will say to them is, if you put your phone down, like you wouldn't have that problem, which is just not, I don't think it's fair. Like it can be a coping mechanism for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. And most adults can't relate to the world that these kids are growing up in where cell phones are so prevalent. So it's like we have this half of our life experience sans cell phone. So it's easy for us to say, just put it down. But if they've been raised in a culture where you never put it down, like it's easier said than done for sure.
Absolutely. A lot of judgment.
Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about cell phones and like little computers in our back pockets in our hand all of the time, is there good resources for people to use their phone for meditative purposes or trying to learn to meditate?
There is an amazing resource. I'm so glad you asked that question. That we share with students at our assemblies that I use, that I recommend to every one of my students, that my daughter uses, my wife uses. It is called Healthy Minds. It is an app from Dr. Richard Davidson, who is one of the foremost neuroscience researchers on mental emotional health. And so I recommend and encourage people to check out this app for a few different reasons. Number one, it's free, and that's always good. It's free through his nonprofit. Secondly, it is totally science-based, totally research-based. And number three, it's accessible. It is down to earth. You can meditate for 5 minutes if you want, up to 30 minutes. You can meditate using this app, and you can choose to do an active meditation. So you meditate while you're walking or vacuuming, or you can sit down and lie down. And another reason is just, it's a really comprehensive, it covers the scope of meditation from mindfulness to emotion-based practices. There's a lot of different ways, let's say, just to strengthen our brain. And this app, I think, touches on a lot of them. I would say absolutely everybody download that app, Healthy Minds, free in the App Store. And I offer it to anybody that reaches out, like, check out that app and then, learn a couple breathing techniques and practice them regularly. And between the two, I think you're going to create some positive momentum for yourself.
I'm glad I asked that question too. I'm going to download that app. I do all my learning on my Peloton app has meditation on it. I don't know if it's good or not. I feel like I'm making a little bit of progress.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Back to the band. There's so much. It's so interesting talking to you. What are the future goals for the band in regards to mental health?
Well, we have visited schools in and around Maryland. We're going to continue that reach there in schools. In the fall, we got to travel up to New York. Looks like in a month or so, we're traveling down to South Carolina. So one goal is just to continue broadening that reach and reach as many students in as many schools as we can. So that's a big piece of our mission. And our foundation and supports the Power of Expression program. And through that, we've also wanted to further the impact that we have when we do reach a school. So we share with students, resources like Healthy Minds. We also talk to the administration and try to introduce them to a nonprofit called the Hope Squad, if you're familiar with the Hope Squad.
We are, yes.
Yeah. So that's another one of our goals for the band, to go place, open the door for these conversations, and then, connect it with the Hope Squad to get a Hope Squad in that school and peer-to-peer suicide prevention support. So I'd say those are the mental health goals initially. And we also offer the Power of Expression for community organizations and adults and stuff like that. So we just want to continue to expand our reach. It's been such a rewarding, purposeful journey that we've found ourselves on. So we want to continue on that journey. And then of late, we've also brought a little bit more focus back to the music, because we hadn't released many new songs because we were just all in for the Power of Expression. But we want to do that too. So we're actually heading into the studio this weekend to record a couple new songs, and they're part of. Yeah, we're really excited.
I'm sure that fuels you up and gives you like.
Absolutely, yeah, and the songs we're recording are part of a second presentation that we put together. We're kind of internally calling it Power Expression 2.0, but it's what we do as a follow-up to the initial one, where we go a little bit further into like QPR and breathing techniques, and we share some different songs and some different stories.
I'm excited to see that, because I feel that follow-up, like there's a lot of schools that have this initial conversation, and you hear from students like, we need more. Like this, it isn't just like, yes, we're aware that suicide is increasing and that suicide is a problem in our school and in our community, and depression and anxiety is raising amongst teenagers. But like, let's go deeper.
Yeah, let's go deeper. Let's always go deeper.
Always go deeper, be more authentic, be more vulnerable. So your foundation is the Ed Lally, EDLALL Foundation.org. I want to make people aware of that. And the app that you mentioned is Healthy Minds.
Yeah, Healthy Minds free app in the App Store. You can, you can check out the Big Infinite. You can follow us on Instagram and our website, thebiginfinite.com. And yeah, I would love to connect with people.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, we end every one of our podcasts with the same question, and I'll just put it out there. Okay. What does the world need to hear right now, Jordan?
Love. That's it. Love. Real, genuine, authentic, vulnerable, open-hearted love.
Awesome. It's February, the month of love here.
Oh, that's right. Look at that. That's perfect.
I love it. You have it on your whiteboard behind you. Love yourself.
Oh, yeah.
I am love, coming out of the power of expression. I just cued in on that. Sometimes love is a learned skill and something that we have to keep working at, just like so many things that we do as humans.
It's interesting that you reference it as a learned skill, because that's what one of the ways I frame meditation for folks is like, love is presence. Just be present with yourself in the way that you'd be present with like a newborn baby. You'd let them scream and cry and you just hold them, with strength, but a softness about you. Approach ourselves the same way and just be present with yourself and allow yourself to be upset, angry, sad, at peace, happy, joyful, whatever, but just be present. And then love isn't some goal that you need to attain. It's just being present with yourself. So carve out 5 minutes on the Healthy Minds app and love yourself.
It's very good advice. And if you are blessed to be a parent, extend that to your children too, especially for teenagers.
Absolutely.
Just being present is so, you're about to embark on those next stages of your young kids' life. They're challenging, they're hard, they're so rewarding, they're so beautiful. But I think for our teenagers, if adults can just be present is really good advice.
Yeah. Well, I'll take that advice to heart and do my best over the next decade. I know we got some new challenges to come.
Oh, it's fun. Well, this has been just a really delightful conversation. Thank you, Jordan, so much for joining me today on a hopeful conversation. And be sure to tune into our next episode. And until then, remember, hold on, pain ends.